Hello and welcome to this episode of ThePrint Mind Over Matter. We talk about how therapy is important. We talk about how therapy is something that all of us should take up. But there are a lot of questions that come up when we think of which therapist do I go to? Just like we go to specific doctors for specific physical ailments, is there something similar for therapists as well? Is there areas that we should know about before we go? What is the kind of research we do before we start therapy? So these are the questions that we are going to tackle in this episode. And for doing this, I have with me Renu Kishore, who is a retired professor of psychology and who's taught for 44 years in Delhi University. So I think she's literally the best person to tell us, how do I find a good therapist for myself? Welcome, Renuji.
Thank you.
So let's start with the first question. So how do I find a good therapist? Or if there are even parameters of what a good therapist is, or is it more like what we like to call bespoke, that it'll vary from person to person?
It's very, very pertinent to ask this question. How do I find a good therapist? You know, in India, there's lack of awareness. There's also a great lack of psychologists around. Very few psychiatrists, very few therapists, and there is no way of finding a counselor for yourself. Sometimes people want help, but they don't know where to go to. So it is definitely a difficult question. But if you want to, again, as you said, it's very similar to finding the right doctor for yourself, medical doctor. There is every person is unique. One's problems are unique. The objectives for which you're going for therapy are going to be different. So one has to understand what exactly is it that you're looking for. So there are many things that you have to, first of all, ask yourself. Do I have a preference for gender of the therapist? Language that he or she speaks? Age? For example, there are people who are senior citizens. They don't want to talk to somebody who's younger. They look for older therapists who would understand the nature of their issues. Cultural background. There are many things that you have to look at. But most important is availability. There are therapists today who are not free. All their slots are booked. The good ones, good therapists. So how to find the right therapist is a really difficult, challenging thing, and the best advice I would give is try out. If you think that you're able to make a connect with the person that you have been advised to go to, and of course, if the cost factor is suiting you, location is suitable. These days, since the pandemic, a lot of us are doing it online, not in person, but you have to look at the cost factor. It's not very cheap. And in our country, insurance does not cover therapy. So there are many things one has to consider. So now I'll come to the question of who is a good therapist. Now, effectiveness of therapy depends a lot on the personality characteristics of the therapist. The person has to be a good listener, non-judgmental, must have the ability to empathize, and the ability to have instill trust in yourself. Confidentiality is a very big issue. So you have to, the therapist you should be able to feel the connect with the therapist. And if you find that you're not able to connect and things are not going the way you think they should, and after a couple of sessions, you find that there is no progress, it's repetitive, and you're not really connecting, you're not feeling heard, then it's time to change.
Okay. I would just like to bring in one point though. Even though you're right, like insurance does not, but then IRDA has just taken out this mandate that mental health insurance is something that, I mean, within health insurance, of course, that mental health insurance should be covered. So I actually did a story, by the way.
Really?
Yes, I spoke to therapists. I did speak to even insurance providers, and you should actually probably read also the story. So what I learned is that it's like OPD services now, like you have in health.
Absolutely.
So if you opt for a coverage which covers OPD services, then actually therapy sessions can be covered. So which I found was really important now.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah, so because for a lot of people, it's simply that it becomes a luxury to fit in the cost of per session into like their monthly budget. So it becomes like a big issue. So coming to this, actually, that we all say that we should go to therapy, but is there a good time to start therapy, or is there some age thing to start therapy? Or often I feel like that this is also from personal experience, that I waited like to almost to the last, the brink to start therapy, because no matter how educated or privileged I have been, I kept thinking that, it's manageable, whatever experiences I have, it's okay. Maybe it happens to everybody. Maybe I'm overthinking this. But I waited. I do understand that it's a problem, but I would like to hear from you, like, when do you actually start therapy?
I'm so glad you're talking about that, because first of all, there is no right age for therapy. And there's a misconception, a myth, that therapy is required only at the final decision making stage, or when the problem has gone out of hand. So ideally, whether I would like to call it counseling, even for children, young children, as old as 3 or 4 or 5, the kindergarten stage, there is a need, because some children will have issues of aggression, stealing, lying, and it's very, very important to address those issues. With children, we don't call it, it's not so much of talk therapy, but we use play therapy. Play therapy techniques, like doll play, puppets, sand, to help them to come out with their feelings, drawing, painting, all those techniques. So therapy, play therapy can happen otherwise, at a very young age. And it's important that, parents as well as educationists understand the importance, that it's not wanting to brush it under the carpet. So children, adolescents need it a lot. And they are facing identity crisis, and they are coming into their own. They need to become independent. They need to come out of the parental umbrella. So everything has, problems are there. Fortunately, today in schools and colleges, there is provision of counselor at the campus, but it's not enough. If in a school or a college there are 2,000 students and there is one counselor, one therapist, it's impossible to do justice. But ideally, one should. So what I somehow feel is that there should be awareness, public awareness, which is happening now in India, fortunately. Otherwise, people usually would go to a therapist only, for example, if the marriage is just about to break. People are just going to come to, they're taking a decision about divorce, and then families will say, "Ek baar to chale jao therapist ke paas, ek baar." No, it's too late, it should have been done throughout, whenever any kind of issues. And I personally want to state very emphatically that therapy and counseling are not just for problem solving or decision making, such as career guidance. It's also necessary for overall development, enhancement of personality. So I think there is no bar of age or stage of problem. I think we should be open and consult. Even we therapists consult therapists.
Yeah.
It is mandatory, in fact. You have to undergo counseling, you have to undergo therapy, you must take supervision, you must take, consult with other therapists if you get stuck, because we are not perfect. So it's a continuous process, not a one-time thing.
So actually, building from what you just said, I agree. In fact, I was actually about to ask the next question was this, what you already answered in a way that, in a school of 2,000 kids, one person, how will that person even handle if their people actually even come up? Yes. So coming back to what you said, that people often wait till the last minute, especially in marriages. Do you think that is also because we have been conditioned in a way to say that it's your personal matter, and that we even for physical ailments, we notice that we like to self-medicate before we actually end up in the doctor's office, or sorry, the chambers, when let's say there's something that has gone off because we self-medicated, right? And do you think there is a need, like in the awareness as well? Like, of course, we talk about mental health more now. Of course, we say that, there are underlying, especially with COVID, obviously everybody's mental health has taken a toll. I mean, obviously it was a collective trauma that everybody experienced. But do you think that when it comes to awareness, a lot of focus should also be given to telling people who may not know where else to look that you can go for therapy just for a better life instead of any kind of problem whatsoever? You may have no problem. Let's just assume there is no problem in your life. Everything is great. And even then, you can take therapy. It's like taking those regular blood tests.
Not only that, I would liken it to why do you go to the gym?
Yeah.
If you're already fit and you're not overweight and you don't have any issues, we go to the gym, we go to beauty parlors to enhance our looks or our fitness. So similarly, why don't we go to mental health experts to improve upon your potential? We are all great people, and we have a lot of potential to improve. And it's required everywhere in our personal lives, in the corporate sector, schools, educational areas, everywhere. Yes, it should be preventive rather than curative. Definitely.
Okay, so coming back to the therapy sessions, usually they last from around 40-45 minutes to an hour. I mean, this is the usual format, and whatever is the money. I'm using my example because I think then it would be more transparent. I remember that the first 4-5 sessions, mine was online because of COVID. I didn't really know what to do, honestly. Like,
you didn't know?
Yeah, in the sense like, it was online, so it was already like very different from being in a room with a person and saying. And they would just say, okay, you can tell. It's like for me, I keep talking, like there's never any issue with me talking to people. But at that point, I was very confused when I was told, okay, tell me. And then I didn't know what to tell this person, right? Like, and I think we spent like half an hour with me being very quiet and not very sure, okay, where do I start? What do I do? Or that a lot of people often feel like sometimes after 4-5 sessions of therapy, they don't know. It's not about whether or not something is working. They do not know what to expect out of a session. They do not know how to go about it, right? And it takes a lot of time for people to actually even come to that idea that, oh, this is what I want, or this is what I would like to. And I'm not talking about specific things that you want. So is there a way that if you're starting therapy, or even if we're in the middle of taking therapy, for us to understand that, okay, this is maybe one aspect, one area that I would focus on? Are there like homework, for example, are there any tools in which we can also help ourselves get the most out of therapy? Because we are paying a lot to obviously feel better. So how do we ensure from our end that, okay, I am getting what I've come for?
That's a wonderful question or topic that you've touched on. Because again, as I repeat myself, people think my therapist is going to solve my issues, will help me to decide, will give me some solution, fix it. That's not therapy. Counseling and therapy are there to help you understand yourself, find your own solutions by talking. A lot of times people think, why am I paying the therapist so much when I only have to talk and he or she is not doing anything?
Yeah.
Why should I pay that money? I'm the one who's talking randomly. No, it's not random thoughts. Again, I also want to tell you another thing, Tina, that there are many schools, many styles, just like in medical science, there are many ways of addressing an issue. So we also have schools of psychotherapy. So you can have the psychoanalytic model, Freudian model, where people like to go to childhood trauma and memories and stuff like that. Then there is behavior modification also CBT, which is very, very common these days, cognitive behavior therapy, where the therapist will try to help you identify your irrational thoughts. Feeling that if you are able to modify your irrational thoughts, your behavior will also change, your feelings will also change. So, when you're trying to choose a therapist, do ask questions and try to know what kind of style, what theoretical model the therapist is going to follow. We as therapists are supposed to, first of all, in the first couple of sessions, rapport building is very, very important. So, the first session you may find nothing really has come out of it, but that formation of trust, where confidentiality is assured and you are feeling heard by somebody who is totally non-judgmental, is not saying, oh, you did that, oh, you had an affair with another man while you were married or something like that. So you're just feeling heard, understood. But usually in the first few sessions, we have to do goal setting, expectations. And the therapist and the client have to arrive at certain concrete goals. So we have some specific goals. For example, I want to learn anger management, or I would like to increase my tolerance limit, or I want my husband to be more expressive, things like that. Those are specific objectives, specific goals, and they must be mutually decided. And they should be concrete and measurable. But we also have general goals which are common to all cases, which is self-enhancement, self-actualization, learning to be independent, overall becoming a better personality. So I hope I've answered.
Yeah, you have. Yeah. So let's take this last question. In the sense, there is this idea that everybody has to take different number of sessions, or sometimes they usually start with, let's say, one per week or something. I know there was a phase when my therapist thought that, I was really struggling, and she suggested I should take one every 5 days. And, it would lessen whatever sense of isolation I was experiencing at a certain time. So is there a way in which you gauge, like, how many sessions should we have ideally? Or, what if I have something that I'm struggling with and I sort of need an emergency session where I feel like I really need to talk to a therapist? So is there a way of setting that? Or do we talk about it with our therapist? Or is that a decision that we should sort of allow the therapist to take for us?
Again, it has to be a mutual decision. You talked about crisis. Yes, yeah. Crisis intervention is a different area of counseling and therapy, because in that you need emergency sessions, could be many, maybe every day, one every day or something. In cases where there has been, say, for a rape victim or something, or somebody who's lost a loved one, those are crisis intervention sessions where they would be more frequent. But otherwise, normally, as you rightly said, it's about a 50-minute to an hour session, and usually weekly sessions. But that decision should be taken jointly by the therapist and the client. Sometimes client wants more sessions. And regarding the total number of sessions, very often the client will ask you in the beginning, doctor, how many sessions do you think I'll need? Yeah. It's very hard to decide, because it will depend on the progress. And we have to evaluate jointly. The evaluation has to be done by the client himself or herself along with the therapist. Are we reaching our goals? Are we really there? So that constant evaluation has to be there. But basically, formation of trust, confidentiality, and being able to talk about your problem sometimes is enough for you to get insight into your own issues. And you suddenly realize, it's like achieving that insight. So there is no particular limit. Today, of course, There are single session therapy techniques, solution based therapies, which are very, very fast, single session therapy also. So new things are coming up every day. And there are people who go on for years with a therapist. So it all depends. There's no single determining factor.
Okay. So I think this has been very insightful, and somebody has explained that there is no way of figuring out as a general idea that you might need X number of sessions, that the first therapist you go to is going to be a therapist. It doesn't have to be like that you can take trial sessions, you can sit and wait and figure out if this person is helpful. If somebody after 20 sessions doesn't feel helpful, you can also change. This is also something that you're paying for. So in a way, it is also a service. So the idea is to get the most out of it. And like Renji already said, therapy is not necessarily about solving a problem or a crisis or an issue. It can be about just becoming better version of ourselves, which we do, like she said, in gyms, we do it in parlors. So why not in our mental health as well, or mental wellness as well, if not health. Thank you so much for talking to me. It was wonderful. And I think even though I have been taking therapy for quite some time, even this was helpful even for me. So that also tells you that knowledge is not really a finite goal. You can keep getting to learn something new about your own therapy every few months probably. Thank you for watching this episode. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on our social media handles. Thank you.